Hello, you're about to listen to part of the 102nd HatchetJob.com gaming netcast, where we discuss sleeping dogs. We'll join the conversation just after we finish talking about artificial intelligence and distributed computing, so that's why you'll hear a few technical terms at the start. In the background you'll see some general gameplay footage, but really the discussion is the main thing. Anyway, enjoy.
Yeah, there's a couple of neat links to sleeping dogs here.
Hey!
Firstly, with your distributed networks idea for vehicles, there's some rather amusing side missions in Sleeping Dogs where you have to use a van with a radio transmitter in it to follow, was it a drugs package or some kind of other package through the sewers? It just made me think of vehicles and radio transmitters. And there were some fairly neat ideas where you had to drive one of those Suzuki vans, the ones that used to turn over sideways before they did the product recall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you had to follow a radio signal underground, and so, you had to.
Can I just say that we're using Suzuki as a generic term for any car manufacturer. We are not suggesting that Suzuki vans have or will ever tip over, causing a danger to the passenger.
They did though?
Well, for legal reasons, Sim, I think we should be very clear.
Oh, right. Okay, yes. Yeah, I was probably remembering it incorrectly.
You see, you're causing ripples. You're a pebble that's causing ripples.
Yeah, it's a good job I didn't tweet that.
Yeah. And it's a good job that nobody will hear it either. So I think that's the best thing about it.
Don't you think there's a danger that refusing to employ ripple-causing pebbles might also mean that you do away with some of the more creative or brave potential employees?
Well, companies don't actually want brave or creative potential employees. They think they do, but managers won't allow them to be brave or creative. A more pertinent question, he says, basically ignoring your position, how long it will be before the norm is to have people that do that. So how long before the people making employment decisions are those people who previously wouldn't have been hired, if that makes sense?
Presumably there's a graph of that somewhere.
There is a graph. I think the term is natural wastage. You're waiting for people to die, which is what's happening which is what the homosexuals in the United States of America are trying to do to get gay rights. Is they're waiting for all the homophobes to die off.
Okay, maybe they could make a list of them and.
It'd be a very big list. Was it the Rascal van?
Yeah, the not Suzuki van, where you had to.
Brilliant.
You had to use the van to. It's one of those missions, as you often get in open world driving games, where you have to follow something.
Yeah.
And these often are tailing other cars, or sometimes it was a train. I think in some of the old driver games, but in this instance, it's I think a package that has been flushed into the sewers, and in order to find its destination and therefore, get a police lead on where this awful drug trafficking was coming from, you had to chase it over the surface, often running people over in the process, and kind of committing murder and several traffic offences and all that kind of stuff in pursuit of the greater good. Something that Sleeping Dogs does repeatedly, actually, where you obviously get a slightly negative rating for these inconvenient accidental deaths, but which at least had a morality meter in terms of allowing you to see when you weren't doing the right thing. Well,
so to give some context, you're a man who is an undercover cop in Hong Kong, and when you go on missions, you'll earn police experience and criminal experience. And if you do bad things or you hurt people, you'll be penalised police experience, or at least it won't go up very much. And so it's not morality meter in the conventional sense. It's really just two differently coloured experience bars that unlock different things. You don't have a choice as such in the mission deciding what you're going to do or how you're going to behave. The outcome is determined. It's just how violent you get during it. That isn't.
Absolutely. You also made me think of this when you were talking about, potential employees tweeting, and how for an undercover cop that, maybe in that instance that might be a really bad thing, a really bad trait to have as an employee. If you kind of took to Twitter afterwards, oh my God, terrible day at work today. Drug dealer boss killed some dude while I was undercover. Sad face.
Do they really sell the undercover cop bit, or do you just feel like a thug most of the time?
It's actually done. I think it's done quite elegantly overall. I know there's a lot of discussion about what is and isn't storytelling in games and all that kind of stuff, but for a game which almost has a binary difference between good and evil, and I'm being a bit unkind in suggesting that it's done on your good score has been taken away and your evil score has been increased. It is a little bit more subtle than that. But for a game that includes those mechanics, the story is in terms of cinema, it's quite well done. It's not a B movie. It's certainly not an A movie, but actually the story deals with that thorny issue of player agency versus the demands of the storyline quite well.
Keep on talking. I just need to look up a film because I want to mention
so
it.
Is it a C film?
No, it's higher than a B and lower than an A. Is it Deep Cover with Lawrence Fishburne, the film you're thinking of?
No, it's not. So So there's a film called The Departed, right? Which is
okay. Mark
Right.
Wahlberg, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack Nicholson.
right.
Right.
Okay. The Departed is based on a Hong Kong film called Infernal Affairs.
Internal
Yes.
Affairs, yeah.
No, Infernal Affairs.
Infernal? Really?
Infernal Affairs.
Yeah, Internal was Richard Gere, wasn't it? And
Yes, I think so, right? And also, I think Reservoir Dogs was based on City on Fire. But
okay.
But anyway, if we're talking about films, there's that are similar to Sleeping Dogs, or what it really pulls most of its inspiration from. I think it is more like a film called. Sorry, bear with me.
Can I interject while you're looking? I think it also draws a lot of inspiration from Jackie Chan films, like things like Police Story. Maybe not so much in the way the plot's constructed, but in the almost slapstick kung fu fights you get into, and the almost choreographed car chases sometimes.
For me, the whole film is really like. The whole game is really like a film called Flashpoint, which is 2007, and it's by a guy called Donnie Yen. Now, the interesting thing about Donnie Yen is that he cross-trains in martial art.
He's very angry.
He's very... Yeah, you're looking at pictures of him.
No, you said he cross-trains.
Oh, cross-trains, very
it's
good.
Awful.
He was also in Blade 2 as the guy with the samurai sword, but he cross-trains, which means I think he's done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Thai boxing, grappling.
Is this what the cool kids call mixed martial arts?
Yeah, so mixed martial arts, right? And so in Flashpoint, this 2007 film, which is fantastic, really good fight scenes, it's a Hong Kong action film, but with Western fighting. So it doesn't have the Jackie Chan, lots of stunters style, and it's not Jackie Chan kind of slapstick where he fights with ladders and chairs. If you look at the combat in that, and then you look at the combat in Sleeping Dogs, you can see that spiritual inspiration.
Okay.
The fighting is, I think, possibly the best fighting I've played in a video game, and that includes the Batman Arkham series and the Assassin's Creed series.
It certainly draws on that Batman thing, doesn't it, where it encourages you to go into flows of moves. So rather than just being a sort of flailing around from one victim to the other, it does encourage you to sort of plot how you're going to move between the groups and use your various unlocked skills as you go.
Yeah, and so you have different enemies, some who are susceptible to being grappled, some who need power strikes, but if you try and grapple, then throw you out the way. I think the most innovative thing about that system, and Lupus, let me know what you think if you agree,
All right.
is that you can grab people and then run with them through the crowd of enemies. You're not just surrounded by people, you can actually make space and take enemies as human shields and reposition yourself in the fight, which adds a wonderful fluidity to it. And then the second thing, and again, Lupus and Sim, let me know what you think of this, because I realise I'm hogging the mic, is that the cars in the game, because it's an open world game, it wins best use of cars, because the cars are dynamic objects. So if you're in a fight in the street and a traffic jam happens, you can take the guy you're fighting with to a car that's pulled up because the NPC in it has got out and run away, smash his head into the door, smash his head into the boot, throw him in the boot and drive away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm conscious of the fact we're talking about something Lupus hasn't really played now, but you can deliberately drive a car up to a place where you know you're about to get into a fist fight,
Yeah.
just so that you can push people in through the windows or stick them in the trunk, and it is quite brilliant, and without obviously wishing to drag us off line too much, when you think of the other GTA games, this. I mean, I think for myself, the actual driving in Sleeping Dogs isn't all that good. It kind of follows that Saints Row school of almost like go-kart. So there's no real weight or physics to it. It's pretty much go faster, go slower, and point in a different direction. And there's not much of a repercussion for trying to do something dreadfully unrealistic. But the fighting kind of puts pretty much all the other open world games to shame, and I know that it's a thing that Sleeping Dogs focuses on. It is as much an Arkham Asylum, Arkham City kind of fighting system as it is an open world game. But then when you look at those other things, Saints Row and particularly GTA, where the gun combat may have always been a little bit clumsy, and the fist combat has definitely been unresponsive. Unresponsive at best. When you kind of look forward to things, like I'm really looking forward to GTA 5. Things from Sleeping Dogs make you almost take a second look at what's come before in other series.
As far as the environmental stuff, I mean, it's not just like running dudes around and throwing them in cars. There's tons of environmental objects and stuff you can throw them into, and some of them that I've seen in videos have been like really gruesome looking. Like, does that ever, like, have you ever found yourself giving pause when you do something horrible to people in the game? Because some of them are pretty nasty.
Yeah, I specifically, this is one of the things, going back to the kind of police score and the Triad score, which are the two things you accumulate, it almost looks as if they put the animations in for dragging somebody over to something which would clearly kill them. An air conditioning unit with a really high velocity spinning fan. If you put someone's head in that, they're not going to fall unconscious to the floor. And, a few of those things seem far more gruesome and fatal than the scoring system leads you to believe.
I agree with what you said, Sim, about GTA 5. And actually, when I was playing Sleeping Dogs, and I did play it on release, so it's been a while now, I remember thinking to myself, GTA 5 is going to have to be absolutely amazing to compete with the gunplay and the fighting.
Yes, I'm trying to remember the gunplay.
The gunplay is tight. It's good. You zoom in. When you build, you can go into bullet time mode when you're leaping over tables.
Got you. Yeah, bit like Stranglehold in that regard. I only ever played the demo of Stranglehold, but it felt similar to that. And it's slow down.
Well, in fact, I think if Sleeping Dogs draws on the Donnie Yen film for its inspiration in terms of other media, the game it actually builds on is Stranglehold.
Sure. For
me, it's kind of the sequel to Stranglehold in some respects. But there's one moment when I was in a gunfight running towards a guy who was behind a table shooting at me. I slid over the table, threw a knife at him and into his head, then came off the table, picked up his gun and started firing again, all in slow motion.
Yes.
So it has these just crazy moments. And then I remember I was on the motorway, and I saw this staircase off the side of the motorway downstairs. So I rode down the stairs, and I rode into a group of criminals in this tiny staircase. I killed one by pinning him against the door with my motorbike, and then I hit the other one so hard he did the splits while standing up. Clearly that was a bug, but it was amazing. The problem is that when you play for a while and when you finish the game, and I put about 35 or 40 hours into it, you realize actually that these pockets of entertainment are set. You don't get them anywhere else. So the way it works in the game is, as you go through the story, you have cop missions to go on, and they're gunfights and tailing people and all sorts of interesting things. When you finish the game, you are allowed to replay certain missions, right? But they are story missions. You can't go back through the game and redo the cop bits that are in the open world. So a huge amount of interesting gunfights are closed off from you when you finish, unless they've updated that in the DLC, of course. The second thing is that, Sim, you talked about going to where a group of gangsters were and grabbing one and throwing him into your car and beating him up, right?
Yes.
The problem with the game is that those locations are set and they never change.
That's very true.
What it doesn't have, which is what the GTA series does have, is it doesn't have any sense of emergence when you're driving around.
No, unless you, and this is where it becomes a bit incongruous, unless you start a fight with the police, which is not really in character, is it? No. When you're an undercover cop, unless you do that, you're right. It doesn't have that go anywhere, do anything kind of chaos that being a bad guy allows you the liberty to have.
And so what you realise is you start to realise, actually, wow, the world's actually kind of a bit sterile. Because nothing unexpected ever happens once you finish the game. It's not a game you can go back into to have fun in unless you're willing to fight the cops, because you're not going to have a fist fight with the cops necessarily because they bring guns. The bad guys don't use guns, they use melee weapons.
Yes, and if they do use guns, then it essentially forces you into a gun battle rather than a fist fight, doesn't it? I mean, you can approach them in order to fist fight them, but you will probably just be shot. And then the other thing is, the more you play it, and this is a really subtle point, but again it references GTA and why the GTA series knows what it's doing, is that for some reason in Sleeping Dogs, it always felt like I was being chased by the police when I started a police chase, rather than they would come in and cut me off. Yes.
Right? So this is a really subtle point, but in GTA 4, when you're driving around, so being chased by police, they'll be behind you, but you'll also see on the mini-map they're coming in ahead of you, which forces you to take different routes and go higgledy-piggledy around the map. In Sleeping Dogs, the impression I always got was, basically, they're kind of forming a... Do you remember Snake, the game where you had to move around a map?
Absolutely.
And avoid gems, yeah? And not run into your tail? That's kind of what it felt like. Which then meant certain aspects of the gameplay kind of became redundant, because in the game you can hop out of your car and leap onto another car and hijack it. So you don't have to stop driving. But if you're always being chased by people who are behind you, who you can outrun, there's no need for you to change vehicles apart from when you're on a story mission.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I kind of almost think it comes back to the not being a criminal thing, and how perhaps it should never been included as part of the game design. I accept that they have this processional police chase stuff going on, but maybe that's just as a result of the fact that you're never really cast as the baddie.
It also felt a lot like we weren't in Hong Kong so much as we were not in LA.
Yeah, I think it was difficult to give it I mean, initially it felt like I had a sense of place, like you say, that could have been Hong Kong. But I completely agree with you. I mean, it's a nice change to not be in something that's obviously in an American city.
Yeah.
But I think this comes back to what you say about it being difficult to find these scripted events that aren't in specific places. When you're not in those things, it's quite difficult to tell which section of the city you're in. They're identified by different names, and they're separated almost in terms of being on sort of 3 or 4 different islands.
Yeah.
But once you're driving around them, and again, going back to the GTA games, this is something I do a lot, is just spend a lot of time kind of soaking up the atmosphere, exploring places, even though I have to accept there's not a great deal to do there. But in Sleeping Dogs, there's quickly the sense that it's another neon-lit, dark back alley is the nearest thing you can hope for in the sense of variety, and the rest of it is very samey. But I'm not trying to put lupus off playing it, for example. Because,
no, I loved it. But
because it's a really
I rented it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Sim, it's not the location, it's the fact everybody speaks in an American accent, apart from the NPCs.
Would you have preferred it in Chinese with subtitles?
I would have liked to have an all Cantonese option.
Okay.
So you're driving around, the radio is in Cantonese, the NPCs are in Cantonese, but most of your contacts speak with an American accent. And so it's this, again, it was this kind of, like, they're holding, like, don't go full Chinese, man. It's like, don't do it. And I was thinking, well, no, if you're going to set it in Hong Kong, either have them all have Cantonese accents or let me have a Cantonese soundtrack. I don't watch Chinese language films. I don't watch foreign language films because I'm looking for something that's designed to be palatable to a Western audience. Because I want something that's being created in a culture and with a sentiment that is different from my own.
You can't see, but I'm nodding my head. I'm nodding in agreement.
Do you think games used to do this a bit better when there seemed to be... I mean, I know some of you have been playing Ni no Kuni. Oh, God. I know.
But for anyone listening, Kuni is a slang term for lady bits in England.
I will not say El Nino Kuni anymore. But how is it pronounced properly? Ni no Kuni.
Ni no Kuni, yeah.
Okay. I know some of you have been playing that, and it kind of... I haven't got a PS3, but I had a PS2, and I was always conscious of the fact that some of the best games I played were imported from Japan, and there was always a discussion about it should have had its original Japanese, speaking parts or soundtracks or that kind of thing. But I did always think that whether it was translated or subtitled, that there was a different sense of... not even culture. I don't know. I don't really how to describe it. But those imported things had a different vibe about them than the more Western things, if that makes sense. Do you think that the fact that we seem to be getting fewer big games exported from Japan means that things like Sleeping Dogs maybe don't have something to hold on to as an example of how to go full Chinese, as you say?
I don't think you really need... I mean, we don't need Chinese games to know what Hong Kong's like, necessarily.
Okay, I think what Lupus says about, maybe not needing to have it all laid out before you in order to understand Hong Kong is true. But yeah, I think I agree with that. It could have done with a little bit more texture, I suppose. Although... I don't know how accurate its undercover police story with the concept of, honouring gangs and tradition. I don't know how far that goes to reflect anything other than movie stereotypes of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think that, I'm going back to the story, I suppose, and I do think it was quite well put together, and I think the way that the main character interacts with the other characters is really well put together. And I think that does give us some of that... cultural identity, even if maybe it's just I can see that because it relates to a Hollywood interpretation of it.
And actually, if you want to talk about Triad culture and so on, there's another good Hong Kong film called Election, which is about a Triad organization electing its head and how there's infighting between the different gang bosses about who will get to be the chief. That touches on the relation to triads and history and Chinese mysticism and so on, because the triads, it would make sense that a criminal organization over there, I suppose, would have traditional or kind of mystical elements, because, of course, it also makes it more appealing to new people into it. And it could be used as a form of order.
Power structures.
I think the game makes a half-decent stab at, again, I don't want to give anything away, but I think it makes a half-decent stab at making a commentary about exactly that kind of thing, actually, about the superstitions and how things are used to control people. And I think that's why I came away with it, not being amazed, like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever played, but I think it has really good foundations in stuff like that, which, if nothing else, gets you thinking in a way that many other games don't.
So we come to the end of that little clip. If you liked what you heard, then head over to hatchetjob.com, where we have 101 other shows, the vast majority of which are not on YouTube. You can, of course, head over to iTunes as well, just search for Hatchet Job, and you can follow us on Twitter, again, Hatchet Job. If you liked what you heard, or if you have any constructive criticism, please like the video or share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, do your own research and draw your own conclusions.